The Blue Fork Diner was quiet at lunchtime, just like always. The coffee was bitter, the stools creaked, and the clock above the counter ran 5 minutes slow also like always. Helena Berger sat in her usual spot in the far left corner, in her wheelchair. A small metal pin clung to the collar of her faded work shirt. To someone who didn't know her, she'd just looked like another tired employee. But Helena was a former Marine twice deployed. She'd left her last mission with one leg less, and a little less trust in people. She didn't talk much anymore. Didn't ask for much either. She liked the quiet. Quiet meant control. No more weapons, just napkins, wrapped around forks and knives. Neat. Precise. Mechanical. Just like cleaning a rifle under fire. Everything was going the way it always did until the door slammed open. 3 men walked in, worn leather vests. Nicknames stitched across their backs. Wolf, Mick, and Rico. Their loud laughter filled the diner like smoke. Helena didn't even glance at them, but she felt the shift in the air. It got heavy like the moment right before a dust storm. Wolf looked Helena over, then turned to his buddies with a smirk. Well, looky here. A vet at the table. What happened, sweetheart? You break out of the VA? Mick burst out laughing. Nah, she's just working the sympathy angle. Probably racking up tips. Helena said nothing. She didn't let her hands tremble. She'd heard worse on the battlefield. But somehow, this civilian mockery felt heavier. Rico slid onto a bar stool and started ringing the service bell over and over. You serving menus today, or just staring at us, huh? Helena wheeled herself over calmly to the counter. Would you like today's special? She asked, voice steady, tone clear. Wolf answered, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Why not, soldier girl? Come roll your little wheels on over here. A couple sitting in the corner flinched but didn't turn their heads. The other waitress kept wiping an empty sugar jar like it might vanish. Helena handed over the menus, her hands still rock steady. They really let you work here? Why don't you roll back to the VA kitchen? Wolf grunted. Helena didn't say a word. She turned away, but something in the air shifted. Rico stood up and followed her. You deaf or just dumb, soldier girl? He shouted. We're talking to you. Then, without warning, he grabbed the back of her wheelchair and yanked it forward. The chair hit the leg of a table, and Helena went tumbling hard onto the floor. A coffee cup shattered. A fork slid across the tiles. Her prosthetic leg twisted sideways under her. And just like that, the entire diner went silent. And in that moment, everything began to change. Time froze. Literally. It was like someone had locked the whole diner in place. A blade-sharp silence. That moment right after the laughter, it was so still, so thick, you could feel it pressing on your chest. Everyone who saw Helena hit the floor knew they should do something. But no one moved. That was the cruelest thing about silence. Plenty of witnesses, not a single voice. Helena lay on the floor. Her right hand slipped on the wet tile as she reached out with the other toward her chair. Her prosthetic leg had twisted, pressing hard into her hip bone. Pain pulsed through her like a slow wave, but it wasn't the kind of pain she feared. She knew this pain. What cut deeper was the couple in the corner turning their heads away. The young waitress, hands shaking, went back to wiping down an already clean napkin holder. The old man staring at his coffee, pretending not to see the photo lying near Helena on the floor. This place, it was supposed to be hers. Her routine, her quiet, her control. Now, the floor was cold, but her pride was colder. That photo, it had slipped from her wallet. Coffee had soaked the edges. In the picture, the soldier's eyes still shone. It was maybe the only photo where Helena ever smiled. Across the bottom, in thick ink, someone had written, "She carried us every time." But now, no one was carrying her. Helena quietly rolled to her knees. She pressed her palms into the wet floor, steadying herself. Bit by bit, she pulled herself upright. No one helped. No one said a word. And that silence, that knowing silence, that's what crushed her most. She straightened her wheelchair, sat down, lips tightly sealed. Her coffee was spilled, her jeans and work shirt stained with dark patches. The metal still clung to her collar, but it was wet now. She'd broken down in front of everyone, and it felt like she was the only one who noticed. At the window, a small boy sat watching. Maybe 8, maybe 9. His hands were pressed to the table's edge like he was holding on, holding his breath. His eyes never left Helena. Next to him sat a man, probably his father. Worn cap, rough hands, a small patch stitched to the side, 2nd Marine Division. A vet, clearly. The boy whispered, "Dad, that woman, is she a soldier?" The man slowly turned his head toward Helena. Didn't answer right away. He looked not at her face, but at her hands, still on the floor, steady, disciplined, quietly burning. Then his eyes found the photo beside her. The writing, "She carried us every time." He took a deep breath, had to swallow hard. Then finally, he whispered, "Yeah, Liam, she's a real soldier." And he stood up, didn't say a word. Not to Helena, not to Rico, whose grin had started to fade. He just walked slowly toward the front door. From his left pocket, he pulled out an old cell phone. Outside, the sun was starting to set. Golden light spilled across the doorway. He paused, looked around, then dialed. "This is Thomas Berger. Civilian location, but it's important. Yes, it's personal, but it's about one of ours. Not urgent, but it needs an honorable response. Send a team. Trust me." He hung up. There was no anger in his face. No smile either. Just resolve. The quiet kind that sinks deep into your bones. Inside, Helena was still at her table. One arm resting on the edge, the other gently rubbing her elbow. The pain hadn't gone anywhere, but something in her eyes had changed. She looked more awake, more alert, like she was waiting, like, for the first time in years. She knew something was coming. Inside, though, everything looked the same. Wolf laughed again. Mick spun a knife on the table. Rico leaned back, feet propped on another chair, looking proud and untouched. They thought silence was victory. They thought Helena's silence meant fear. But out there, something was moving. Quiet, disciplined, no rush. Because some honors take time. But when they arrive, they change everything. Helena sat silently at her corner table, still in her chair. Not a single tear slid down her cheek. Her lips didn't tremble. Her back was straight, but something cold still twisted quietly in the middle of her chest. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about weakness. It was the silence from everyone else that hurt most. Because silence, real silence, can cut deeper than a punch. The air inside the diner felt heavy. The warmth had vanished somehow, even though the temperature hadn't changed. Faded sunlight from the wide front windows stretched across the floor in pale yellow bands. Helena's pants were stained with coffee. Her shirt was still damp. Her hands rested flat on the table, palms open, fingertips tracing the pattern in the laminate. But she wasn't really looking at anything. The only thought in her mind was, alone again. No one. Again. But Helena didn't know. Something outside was moving. Something heavy. And its name was respect. Honor. A silent but unshakable presence. Outside, Thomas Berger leaned against the hood of his old truck. The sky had gone a deep orange, the sun laying down its last light behind the hills. His call was over, but the weight hadn't lifted from his chest. Most of his civilian days had passed quietly. But being a Marine didn't end with a uniform. Sometimes it meant answering a child's question. Sometimes it meant standing up when someone else fell. And right now, someone had fallen quietly, right in front of everyone. And no one should look away. It had been exactly 18 minutes. Inside, the diner looked the same, at least from the outside. Wolf was still sitting at the counter, laughing to himself. Mick spun a salt shaker between his fingers. Rico leaned back in his chair, casting the occasional smug glance toward Helena, shaking his head. They were experts at pretending nothing had happened. Born into a world where cruelty had no consequences. But just beyond the door, another world was arriving. Silent, disciplined, and very, very real. Helena sat a little straighter. Something inside her shifted. A twinge. The kind you only get on a battlefield, crouched in the brush, waiting, sensing something before it appears. Her eyes lifted. She looked toward the front window. And right then, a dark green SUV rolled up slowly in front of the diner, its tires kicking up soft dust from the road. The engine wasn't loud, but somehow, it drowned out everything. It pulled up straight across the entrance. On the side panel, a faded but proud emblem, United States Marine Corps. The figures inside were blurry, but the silhouettes were clear. Upright, solid, moving forward without a single word. Inside the diner, every sound stopped. Wolf left a sentence hanging in midair. Mick's salt shaker froze in his palm. Rico's gum stiffened in his cheek like his jaw had locked. The door opened. The first to step in was a broad-chested man with gray hair and a cane. Every time the cane touched the floor, it was like the tiles might crack. Behind him came a tall, clean-shaven young Marine carrying an empty wheelchair. Last came a woman in captain's uniform. Her medals caught the fading light and flickered with every step. Each medal spoke of a different war, a different kind of honor. Everyone in the diner felt it. Their throats tightened. The waitress froze, terrified to spill her tray. You could have dropped a fork and heard it shatter. But no one moved. Because they all felt it, a presence had entered the room. And it wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was something deeper. Real respect had just walked in. The captain lifted her gaze. First, she looked at Helena. She knew her. Then, she scanned the room. When her eyes landed on the three men in the corner, her voice cut through the silence. We received a report just moments ago. A veteran was publicly harassed in this establishment. This woman served her country with honor. She is a United States Marine. The gray-haired master sergeant stepped forward toward Helena's table. He brought his cane down once more, then stood tall and still. Staff Sergeant Helena Berger. I apologize we're late, he said, calm and firm. Then he raised his hand to his brow and gave her a crisp, unwavering salute. Helena stared for a moment. It was like all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. But deep in her body, the training still lived. She returned the salute, quietly, but exactly as it should be. And just like that, the weight in the room shifted. Silence still filled the air, but it didn't belong to them anymore. After the salute, there was a moment of silence. But this time, it wasn't fragile. It wasn't the kind of silence born from fear, shame, or hesitation. It was the silence of respect. Everyone in the diner had stopped breathing, it seemed, just to witness that moment. Helena's chest rose just slightly and then fell. When her eyes met the sergeant major's, something deep inside her, a buried muscle memory reawakened. There was no threat now. There was command. There was trust. And most of all, she was no longer alone. The young Marine carrying the wheelchair stepped forward with measured steps. His uniform was spotless, like the creases had just been pressed. His entire posture spoke of a spine that had never bent. As he approached Helena, their eyes locked. Jonas Keller, he said quietly. Back then I was just Private Keller. That day in Fallujah, when the Humvee blew, you carried me out of the fire. My left arm was burned. Blood was pouring from my right eye. But you didn't flinch. Now I'm a corporal. Because of you. Helena's eyes shimmered. But no tears fell. It wasn't sadness, it was recognition. She saw a memory walk up and speak to her. The blast, the flames, the screaming. All of it echoed for just a second. But this time, she wasn't alone in the remembering. There was a witness. And that kind of witnessing heals without reopening wounds. Then the captain stepped forward. Her medals caught the light, but what struck most were her eyes. Not cold, not harsh, but sharp, honest. Eyes you couldn't lie to. Her voice carried calm, but strong. Captain Camila Wagner. We're here following a civilian report. But this isn't just any visit. Because in this room, there's a Marine who never stopped serving even when off duty. She turned her gaze slowly to the far corner, where they sat Wolf, Mick, and Rico. And suddenly, they looked smaller. They couldn't smile anymore. Couldn't speak. Their hands rested awkwardly on the table, eyes darting anywhere but forward. The captain looked at each of them one by one. What happened here wasn't just an attack on a woman. It was an attack on a soldier. No, on a leader who carried her unit through hell. And when you attack her, you attack all of us. Sergeant Major Marcus Stein took one step forward. His cane struck the tile hard. No one lays a hand on one of ours. Not in war. Not in peace. This isn't a policy. It's a vow. Still, no one in the diner spoke. But the feeling in the room had shifted completely. The crowd that once watched in silence was changing. First confused, then angry. Now, they simply stared at Helena. But this time they really saw her. At the window, Liam pulled up his sleeve and turned to his father. Dad, I want to be a soldier. Thomas Berger didn't take his eyes off Helena when he replied. Then first, learn to stand like her. Learn to lift someone when they've fallen. And just then someone no one noticed before stood up. An old man, quiet, wearing a faded cap with a worn patch, Korean War veteran. He said nothing, just raised a trembling hand to his brow, and saluted. Then Melissa, the young waitress by the door, set down her tray and stepped forward. Her eyes met Helena's. She bowed her head, then stood tall, shoulders back. From the far end of the diner, two more men rose. One an ex-deputy, the other former National Guard. They weren't in uniform, but you could see it in their posture. They saluted too. And then, like falling dominoes, half the diner stood. Young, old, men, women. Some bowed their heads. Some stood with hands over hearts. Some simply stood tall. But all of them were saying the same thing: respect. Wolf, Mick, and Rico started shifting in their seats. Those leather vests suddenly felt too tight. Their cocky smirks had drained into pale confusion. That old "nobody can touch us" attitude gone, replaced with something colder: we don't belong here anymore. But the biggest silence came from Helena. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She just placed one hand gently over her chest, then pulled out her wallet. That old, coffee-stained photo. She unfolded it once more. The paper was wrinkled now, but the writing still showed clear. She carried us every time. In that moment, no one saw just a woman. They saw a soldier, a leader, a monument to quiet honor. And now, everyone knew it. The thing people least expect in life is that a salute could change everything. But what happened in that diner that day wasn't just about restoring a soldier's honor. That day, even silence changed shape. Helena Berger still sat in her corner. Same wheelchair, same coffee-stained shirt clinging to her back. Her pants still damp at the seams. But no one looked at the stains anymore. Now they looked at her eyes, at her hands, at the small pin on her chest. No one asked where she came from, because now everyone understood she belonged here. Captain Camilla Wagner gave Helena a brief nod, and like a commander who had fulfilled her duty, she turned to leave. "As long as you remember us," she said, "we'll be here." Corporal Jonas Keller gently set the spare wheelchair down beside Helena. He'd brought it just in case. But Helena glanced at it, then met his eyes and shook her head slightly. "Mine's just fine, young man," she said, and for the first time, she smiled. In that moment, Jonas realized something. When she carried him through fire all those years ago, she had that same smile. Proud but quiet, strong but never loud. And that's why sometimes a single salute could change an entire order. The Marines left. They said nothing as they walked out. Their exit was as silent as their arrival. But the imprint they left on that ground wasn't going anywhere. The engine faded into the distance. The dust settled. People sat back down. But nothing was the same. The sign outside still read the Blue Fork, but that would change in a few days. Helena didn't know that yet. But Dave, the diner's manager, as he closed the shutters that night, felt a kind of shame he hadn't let himself feel in years. He thought about how he hadn't moved, how he hadn't done anything when Helena hit the floor. His hands shook. Late that night, standing by the register, he pulled out a small notepad and wrote only one sentence: "I watched her fall, but I'll be there when she rises." The next morning, Helena came in just like always. Early, quiet. She began setting napkins on the tables like nothing had happened. But something had. Melissa, the young waitress, was the first to greet her. She carried a clean mug. On it, a new emblem, 2 wings, and a single word underneath: honor. "Let me get your coffee today," she said, her excitement barely hidden. Helena looked surprised, not out of pride, but like someone encountering something they weren't used to. She nodded with a smile. "Looks like it's going to be a tough shift. That'll help." Then she rolled to her corner table. But now, it wasn't just a table. A small brass plaque gleamed on its surface, reserved for those who carry the Table of Honor. As the days passed, little things began to change. Dave brought in a carpenter to update the diner's sign. When it went up, it no longer read Blue Fork. Now it said, "The Honor Table." And beneath that, in small lettering, "Respect is our main dish." The back wall of the diner was repainted. A large frame was hung. Inside, photos of local veterans, some in uniform, some in simple clothes, all standing tall, all facing forward. At the center, a photo of Helena with her unit. And beneath it, those same words: "She carried us every time." But maybe the biggest change was this: people looked at each other differently now. When new customers walked in, their eyes searched for Helena. And when their eyes met hers, some nodded, some whispered, "Thank you." Some paused by her table and quietly laid a few dollars down without saying a word. It wasn't charity. It was acknowledgement. Not pity, but collective reckoning. Dave hired 2 new workers. One, a retired logistics sergeant. The other, a former field medic. On weekends, Jonas Keller stopped by, grabbed a coffee, sat with Helena. Not many words were exchanged, but what passed between them was enormous. And those 3, Wolf, Mick, and Rico, they never showed up again. Rumors floated around town, but no one paid much attention, because the town had started looking elsewhere, not at those who made people fall, but at those who helped them stand back up. Helena still sits in the same chair, but now, she's never alone. Not on the wall, not at the table, and not in the hearts of those who finally saw her. The sun was slowly sinking behind the mountains. The town felt like it was taking its last breath of the day. The sky had turned red, then faded into a bluish-purple haze. At this hour, the honor table diner was usually quiet. But now, the quiet was different. Not cold anymore, but soft, comforting, like a warm blanket at dusk. Helena Berger sat at her usual table in the corner. Her worn flannel shirt carried a small, faded American flag patch stitched near the shoulder. Worn, but worn with pride. Her face showed the years, but her eyes still held a quiet flame. One hand reached out and gently touched a fork on the table's edge. Everything was just as it always was. Orderly, silent. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Just then, the front door opened. A young man stepped inside. His face was fresh. His uniform, brand new. A few folded orders stuck out from his pocket, and his hands looked stiff, trying hard to stand like a soldier, but still. You could see the kid in his eyes. He looked around the diner, and then he saw Helena, the woman in the wheelchair. He hesitated. His steps slowed. The cap in his hand was crumpled from how tightly he'd been gripping it. Helena noticed. She gave a small nod. "First deployment?" she asked calmly. The young man stopped, tried to clear his throat, but his voice cracked. "Yes, I ship out tomorrow morning. First assignment." "Ma'am." Helena looked up, eyes locking on his. Not like a stranger, but like a mother, a commander, and an old friend all at once. "What's your name, soldier?" "Leon. Leon Kruger. Infantry." Helena motioned to the seat across from her. "Sit down, Leon. Coffee's average, but the company ain't bad." He hesitated for a second, then slowly sat. Instead of wiping the sweat from his face, he lifted his chin a little higher. He was trying to look tough, but questions crowded the corners of his eyes. Helena chose her words with care. "Are you scared?" Leon opened his mouth, then closed it. Looked down. Finally, in a quiet voice, barely above a whisper. "A little. But everyone keeps saying don't be. Like being scared means you're weak." Helena smiled gently. "The truth is, being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about walking forward while you are." Another silence filled the table, but this one didn't weigh him down. It wrapped around him like armor. He sat straighter. Just then, Dave stepped out from the back, gave Helena a respectful nod, then looked at Leon and smiled. Melissa, the waitress, brought 2 coffees. Helena's cup was different this time, a custom mug with gold writing across the side. "She carried us every time." Leon looked at it. "Read the words." Turned to Helena. "That's you, isn't it?" Helena dipped her head, smiled, but said nothing. The door opened again. This time, not just a breeze, but familiar faces. Sergeant Major Marcus Stein, Captain Camila Wagner, Corporal Jonas Keller. No uniforms, just civilian clothes. But their posture? Unchanged. They walked to Helena's table. No one spoke. Jonas took the seat next to her, gave Leon a wink. "If it's your first time at this table, you're one of us now." Helena gently placed her hand on Leon's forearm. "You're here today. Tomorrow, you'll be somewhere else. But remember this, Leon. You're never alone. Someone always comes back. Because that's what we learned." No one spoke for a while. Cups clinked softly. Whispers filled the background. But something stronger than silence filled the room: belonging. Unity. A quiet bond among those who remained. A few diners glanced at the table from across the room. Some lowered their heads. Some blinked tears. Some just smiled quietly. Outside, the sky had gone dark. Helena reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. She opened it gently and wrote. Today, a boy came in. His eyes held fear, but his steps carried hope. I told him he wasn't alone, because I once learned the same. Someone stepped from the shadows and said, I'm here. Now it's my turn. She closed the notebook, looked up at Leon. Want to know a secret, soldier? Leon nodded. Yes, ma'am. Helena smiled and winked. Being a soldier isn't just about following orders. Sometimes, it's just sitting at a table and helping someone else stand. The door creaked open again, but this time, no breeze. Just a folded note, taped to the side window of an old green SUV outside. We always come back. Just don't quit. That night, The Honor Table Diner was more than a restaurant. That night, a tradition was passed on, a name was remembered, and one more soldier learned. He would never face it alone. This isn't just Helena's story. It's the story of everyone who served quietly, who fell and stood again, and still carried others on their back. And if you've read this far, then now, it's your story too. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that honor quiet strength and true courage. Thank you.